What if? What if the thing that makes some people truly great in marketing or sales is not excelling at their individual craft alone? Well, you don't want to miss drawing from the deep well of Scott Barnett's experience. Hello and welcome to Revenue Generation as a Team Sport. My name is Roger Courville and welcome to another conversation that we call V2's Thought Leader Conversation Series. You know here that we help you reach your goals with virtual or hybrid event production related to dialing in really specific use cases with the platform that helps you get the data analytics and goals reached that you want. But we're not here to talk about me or us today because I've got with me a friend and someone with whom I've worked closely enough to understand that he has a deep well to draw from. Scott, welcome.
Thank you, Roger. You've got a deep well too. I think maybe deeper.
Not in the way that I'm hoping we get out of you today. I mean, Fill in a couple gaps for us. Tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Scott Barnett. I am a senior marketing leader, and I've also been a consultant. I've been an entrepreneur. I've had a unique sort of set of experiences in marketing operations, marketing automation, and then also starting my own company in the construction marketing space, and then selling. So that leads us to where we are today.
Which is where we are today. And you've been in marketing, you've been in sales, you understand tech. And of course, every organization that we know on the planet has some point of disconnect between marketing and sales. So where does someone even begin when thinking about revenue generation as a team sport?
Well, I think a lot has sort of changed over the course of the last few years as we've looked at the importance of sales and marketing alignment in terms of achieving goals. The old model was marketing would create leads and pass them to sales, and there would be this sort of neat baton handoff, and then sales would hold their section of the goal. There was a sort of very discrete plan around who owned what.
Right.
But the new model seems to be shifting more towards seeing this as a team sport where marketing and sales are engaged throughout the funnel. And marketing, for example, is doing things like talking to leads beyond the point at which it becomes an opportunity, and then re-engaging with leads full bore when they become customers to do things like customer marketing and onboarding and helping scale communications in the way that marketing and really only marketing can do with the tool sets that we have. And then you look at how sales is engaged. You know, sales has always owned the number. They've always had to generate their own leads and do outbound cold calling and prospecting as part of their life. And they hold that number and that responsibility. But what I think a lot of them have come to realize, I certainly did when I started my company, is that you've got to excel at some disciplines related to marketing in order to generate those leads, in order to make the progress. And so, for example, marketing and sales both have a lot to learn from each other and should work together in terms of figuring out who to target, who to put on the list of accounts, for example, that they're going to go after together. That's a key area where we sort of need to work together, and I think where this convergence is kind of happening.
Yeah, I love the fact that in addition to large corporate experience, you also have that entrepreneurial perspective, which is like, we're all on the same team. I remember when we I was co-founder of a company that we co-founded when I left Microsoft, and because the CEO was of kind of a sales mindset, quite literally 20% of every senior executive's income was tied to the number. So we're all in sales, regardless of whether you got ops or marketing or whatever. So just out of curiosity, since a lot of probably who's listening here might be dialed in because they are dealing with that, because it is just so common. Let's look at each side of the equation. How do we start with marketing? What are some things that marketing professionals could learn from sales, if not from doing sales?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of how I progressed into this. So I was in marketing most of my life and had a big sort of shock when I was thrown into the sales world, starting my own company. Um, and learned a lot. I think I'm actually a better marketing person now as a result of having that experience. And, to give you an example, back when I was in marketing, we focused on things like let's create this super comprehensive mother of all PowerPoint decks that's got 100 slides in it, and let's march that into the sales demos and let's present that. Um, and very quickly you kind of learn that that's not going to work in a real sales world. If you walk in with a super super long demo, don't spend any time exploring or investigating what's going on with the client to understand their pain points, you're going to get tossed out of the room pretty quick.
What?
And
If you don't think I'm cool, let me just show you some more. I call
let me
that
just
I call that
on slide
infobarf.
77, you're going to be convinced.
Exactly. Exactly. And by the way, you should go follow Scott on LinkedIn, and he goes into more detail in one of his many insightful posts there. So flip that around, and I'm curious your perspective on what sales could learn from marketing, because that's actually how I ended up there. I went from carrying a bag to being in marketing, I had the opposite path from you how many decades ago. But what could sales learn from marketing?
I think one of the key things that sales can learn from marketing is really starting to research the target more, understand who they're putting into their pipeline as a potential deal. One of the places where sales gets to be super strategic is where they put their time, right? So Mark
Right.
Hunter, who's one of the guys that I follow religiously, who's a sales influencer, talks about how time is the most precious commodity for a salesperson, and how they invest their time will generate their results. And so, if, for example, they have bad targeting, they will not meet their number. They won't have the right folks in there. And marketing spends an incredible amount of time focusing on targeting. They spend a lot of time identifying who is the ideal client persona, who fits that, what companies make the right amount of revenue, who looks like my existing customers, right? And so if you're in marketing, you have to develop that discipline. And that's all stuff that sales could be really well served by.
Yeah. You know what? Mark Hunter's you should go and follow Mark Hunter too. He's actually a friend of mine. I know Mark.
Is he?
I should
I
have
love him.
I should have him on the show. Yeah, I know him from the professional speaking world. But connecting the dots, something that you said a little bit earlier about kind of the old way of doing things really touches down with what you were just saying, what sales needs to grow into. And that was the shock that I had, right? Because in that old model is here's the marketing qualified lead and the sales qualified lead, and when is it cleanly handed over? And I just remember salespeople just having one of two things. I don't have enough leads, or these leads are crap, right? And there was just in the siloed world that was like it was all on marketing to just hand me a nice, beautiful, finished meal on a plate, and then
Yes.
of course when I went into marketing, I found out it wasn't quite so simple. I'm just curious in that more integrated perspective. Would you put that into the category of account-based marketing or account-based growth, or is there a particular model that you like as an improvement on the old ways?
Well, I mean, so the sort of lead, converting down the funnel waterfall method is sort of the traditional model, and it works great in places like SaaS companies, which have a pretty small deal size and really high transaction volumes. Um, but it can fall flat if you're in a company that's essentially hunting elephants.
Right.
If your average deal size is $20 million, and you do 16 deals a year, um, you can't follow the traditional uh, model exactly, and that's when you start getting into the account based growth strategies that I think are really really starting to come online, and with some of the tools like demand base and others like them, companies are starting to tackle that. Um, It's funny because account-based marketing is a term you hear a lot about today, and I try to stay away from that
Yeah.
because it drives people to think about that whole ABM thing as a marketing thing, right? Well,
Right.
and salespeople can just disengage once they hear that. But the fact is the model breaks down pretty quickly if sales isn't part of it. So a lot of companies are moving towards account-based growth, or they're calling it ABX. For that reason, they're moving away from ABM as a term.
Yeah. Which, at least in my humble opinion, begins with a mindset before it's a software or a process or something like that, right? To the point that you made a little earlier about sales, great, because probably plenty of folks here listening to this aren't necessarily working on $20 million deals, but
Right.
we live in a world that has a degree of complexity now that is off the charts, right? So whether that's multiple channels by which you could possibly even get to know your target or targets, or that's dealing with the multiplicity of potential influencers inside of an organization because they're all a whole lot more connected than they used to be. I got some Siemens certification eons ago when I was at Placeware, and then the words account-based marketing or account-based growth hadn't even been invented yet.
Yeah.
But the deal was, how do you deal with complexity, right? Because we used to think, oh, who's the decision maker? Do they have budget, authority, time, and some fairly simple kind of top level things, and those are important. But what is the nature of the web of conversations going on within the target account is a problem for both marketing and sales.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing about looking at things from an account level is I think sales has always naturally been geared towards doing that. They've always had a list of target accounts that they want to win. When they want to win, they don't think about Joe Gonzalez, the decision maker, necessarily. They're thinking about the brand that's going to bring 20 million or whatever into their company that year, the big deal. And so and they understand that they need to touch not just the person who signs the contract, but they need to touch all of the other folks that are in the deal, the influencers, the ones who could be blockers. They have to map out that entire process. And so they, I think, are naturally geared towards accounts. I think marketing has struggled with this in some cases until the advent of some tools that have started to give us some real metrics around what is happening at the account level. And so you look at, for example, a tool like Demandbase. It can tell you who's been on your website. It can tell you, based on these accounts, what kinds of terms are they searching on. It can provide you a platform in which you can try to increase awareness of your company across and your offerings across an entire account by doing things like display ads in LinkedIn. It even has some really cool stuff that you can do where it can orchestrate or automate the movement of accounts as they move through your buyer's journey, right? So somebody who's an account that's aware, and then you start to see signs of engagement. Well, if that engagement's anonymous, you don't know who at that account you might reach out to. Some of the tools now make it easy to find those people, to dig in and actually to the organizations and see who they are, look at who your standard buying center is, and then start to make outreach to them in concert with sales. And so these tools have forced marketing and sales to play nice and play in a new way and work together. And that's, I think, really what's driving this whole idea around this being a team sport.
Yeah, well, I remember when we implemented HubSpot some years ago, that, of course, at the time I was an exec at a 30-person company, so it was pretty easy to have those conversations. But to your point, right, you in marketing, let's talk about marketing for a second. You in marketing are now forced to actually get into the head of your sales team by virtue of some of these new tools that you have. For instance, what do I want to do with somebody who hits my website? Does it make a difference if that person hits my website today and then 3 months from now versus today and then 2 days later? Right. And so now that kind of fuzzy logic of determining what constitutes interest and or how am I in marketing going to help you in sales prioritize your time, is now in a way forced upon marketing, I should say, because now you've got to make marketing decisions that make you think like a salesperson, as in, is that behavior something that is indicative of why I would want to prioritize contacting that person versus somebody else?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because you look at all the data that's now available, and there's a lot of detective work that has to be done by both the marketing and the salesperson. So, for example, let's say someone's on your website, they're not a customer today, and they're sort of all over the place, end up on the jobs page, and then come in, spend a little bit of time on solutions and disappear. You know, is that an account that might be interested, or is that just somebody who thinks that they want to work for you, right? and,
Yes.
is all that solution stuff actually them getting ready to regurgitate for a job interview? You've got to be able to suss that out and figure that out using the data. But it can get really sophisticated. Let's take a customer example where they have one product of yours, and then they end up on the solution page and they're looking at another additional product that you could cross sell. Well, I would say that is a huge, huge opportunity that should be flagged with a red alert with your salespeople, and that's what some of these systems allow marketing and sales to do now.
Yeah. I think there is this granularity of thinking about the customer journey or buying process that people understand instinctively, but even when they're trapped in kind of an old way of thinking, right? The term you used earlier, waterfall, right? Oh, here's the pipeline, here's the funnel, bam, okay, now it's a sale, and think about moving on to the next person. But every one of us has now been influenced by the fact that we open up our phone, we install an app. It's almost entirely a freemium model. And now they're doing behavioral analytics to figure out what can I upsell you on? And they've created a science out of just the process of upselling, quote unquote, after the sale.
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole model has changed because you're dead on right. Like we've made these applications and these new models that help people move from freemium to paid, to get a foot in the door product, and then next thing you know, you're being upsold something that's the real product that they've had in mind for you all along. And there's all of this intelligence that's coming in from the world of things like e-commerce, and data analytics that look at like what might be the next best match kind of product for you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's super interesting, like where things are going, and I think it's opening up a lot of things in people's minds at all levels of business.
Yeah, and to me, honestly, of course, it's obviously going to depend on somebody's comp plan, but sales
Yes.
should be thinking about marketing in that way too, right?
Yeah.
I'll use another analogy, but for those of you who are here, Scott and I know each other because he worked at the go-to folks eons ago, and he did really deep analytics, and our old friend Kelly Eason, right? And then got into in-app analytics, even when that was really super new. And the nature of what you can do inside of an app is just like now what you can do in all of this front end on your website kind of thing with regard to understanding what people are using, what they want to use, and perhaps sussing out intent. But let's take that complex selling scenario and all of this potentiality, but use some of your words to say, okay, let's stay focused on the main thing. Some of your words that I loved was get to the damn demo.
Yes. Yeah.
So we got all
You've been
this
reading that
stuff,
article.
but we really need to get the football down the field. Get to the damn demo. How do you get to the damn demo?
I think that is the key is salespeople are always very attuned towards the process of advancing the football down the field, of moving stuff from what's a potential to what's in my pipeline to what's closed, and getting in front of the decision maker and showing the product. And the thing that marketing people I think sometimes struggle with is they don't spend their time in kind of like a show mentality. They talk about the benefits. They talk about, gosh, this thing is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they don't actually say, you prospect said you need to fix this problem. Let me show you how this problem gets fixed. Which is what a salesperson does, and a disciplined salesperson does, knowing that if they don't get to the point, they're going to get tossed out of the office here, or off the online meeting in a very short amount of time. So being really efficient with your use of time is something that a marketing person who's spent some time in sales will learn, and I think it makes us better. Honestly, I think it makes us more focused.
Yeah, I would agree. And Peter Cohen's book, Great Demo, one of the essential elements of that is demonstrate the most potent thing first, right? This presumes that you understand the what's keeping them up at night or that kind of thing. But he's like, don't bury that 3 points into the demo, and don't do a linear thing. Well, here's how you log in. And right. He's like, if you know that's the most painful thing they have, whatever it is, show that first. Yeah. And then pick off the list of the priorities that you know that they have. And I always thought that was good advice.
I think that's great advice. I mean, one of the things that I've worked on in the past are these vidyard videos where you get a video introduction inside an email, and you could actually, if you knew that someone's pain point, you could include a short sort of, hey, I saw, or when we spoke, you mentioned these big pain points, but this is the one that really stood out for you and said was costing you all this money. Let me show you how that works, and then you can transition then into showing a screen share of your product in the platform. It's all within an email. Now suddenly your sales guy is turned into a marketing guy because he's doing video emails, right? So the technology really is starting to blur the worlds in a way that's very, very cool.
Which is a really potent tool, I think. Those didn't exist in the years back when I was in that role. But because those then have analytics that the salesperson sees, you begin to put them into the marketer's shoes by going, oh, how many opens did I get? How long should this video be? Was it more useful to say this at the beginning or say this at the beginning? Those kinds of things I think is a pretty cool thing. But talk about alignment. Is there anything that we've missed with regard to talking about the secrets to driving better alignment between marketing and sales?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we got to stay away from is this sort of finger pointing thing. I think what becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy is you take a team, and a team that's losing, a team that's not hitting their goal or whatever, often will turn to finger pointing instead of everyone accepting responsibility for what they could have done better, and how they could work together better to drive a result that I think will make them win. And so alignment is really about a couple things. It's about, hey, let's talk about where we have shared interests and shared goals. And let's not spend all of our time on metrics, for example, that marketing might care about, but that sales has no interest in, right? Let's put the shared stuff on a shared dashboard, and let's align around this. Let's talk about it. And so it means having the same metrics. It means getting together and talking. It means having alerts and talking about the breakdowns and being honest, but not in a finger pointing way, more in a let's improve the process way. And I think those things, plus coming up with plans, right? So if sales has a big number to make, they got to back into how many calls they're going to make, and they got to back into how many accounts they need in their pipeline. They have to kind of step back from, this is what I need in sales. How do I get there? And marketing needs to help them to achieve those goals and say, okay, well, of the ones you need to add to your pipeline, here's how many we think we can help you with. Here's how many we can add. And we'll take some goals too, and we'll have some skin in the game too. As soon as you both start working together, both functions, to achieve that ultimate goal of driving the revenue, I think that's where the real synergies start to happen. And in a small company, it's super obvious. In some cases, it's one guy doing the sales and the marketing, right? So you can't fight. But in larger companies, this can get tough, and you got to spend some time to get on the same page. What
Oh,
do you think?
oh, wait a minute. Are you interviewing me? No, well, you said something that maybe I'll put an exclamation point behind, because I think part of deciding what you own together also necessarily includes what you don't own together,
Yeah.
right? And this is going to go back a whole lot of years, and therefore kind of refer to the old model. But I think of a quantitative model that is kind of like an XY axis. Roger holds his arms up like a graph. In one sense, marketing's goals are at a 90-degree angle to the sales goal. You already identified sales is all about maximizing your time, which means that if I can only make X calls today, I need to make those the best calls with regard to what is my, in a sense, average revenue per call. That means I might call one person 12 times over the next month, and another person I don't call at all. At least in the old model, we used to hear things like, well, you need to touch everybody 6 times or 9 times before you get there, right? So marketing's thinking, well, wait a minute, we got this lead here. We spent $180 to generate, and you never even called him once. And my thought was in sales was going, well, no, I see the world differently. And I think it's useful to think about not only what you own together, but what you don't own together, meaning, okay, marketing also then is responsible for how we nurture or warm these people that on one side, or sales. I think the same is true when it comes to like KPIs. It's easy, I think, to go, oh, here's the KPIs, calls to demos, demos to proposals, proposals to whatever your KPIs are. But at some point, if you don't start optimizing the process, the only answer is more. You want to make more sales, you got to do more demos. You got to do more demos, you got to make more phone calls. How am I going to make more phone calls if nothing else has changed? Well, I'm going to work 10 hours a day instead of 9 hours a day, right? At some point, there is no more there in terms of how do we make our nut this quarter. And so I think at some point, I have to know what I don't own along the way.
I love that point though, because I mean, where you go with this is something that people who owned a business get, because time it becomes incredibly critical. And so you have to be able to optimize what you're doing. If your funnel converts at X%, um, and you have to keep feeding more and more in there, that means spending more money, it means spending more time, it means a lot. When what might work better is making minor tweaks to optimize key things in the funnel. So maybe what's happening is you have all these people who are showing up on your website, but your website's terrible, or it doesn't have a good placement of the call to action buttons or whatever it is. And testing over time, you would be able to get more of those people in, and your visit to lead creation rate would double, right? And there are some really great thought leaders out there in the area of conversion rate optimization who can talk to you about how to optimize that part of the funnel. Or maybe your problem is downstream and you're doing a ton of demos, but you're just not closing the business. And so maybe it's your conversion rates there are the issue. When I started out doing sales, I was doing things in a very sort of marketing-esque way, where I was very soft, for example, in my close. Um, I learned over time that if you listen to people who are experts in sales and how they structure conversations and the questions that they ask, they drive more sales by asking better questions and structuring conversations to head in a certain direction. And so I was able to increase and essentially double the sales that I was doing just by adopting some basic changes. And what was funny was what got me to do a lot of that was driving around in a car with my mom, who is a sales professional who's got 40 plus years experience doing sales, and having her say, well, I noticed you might have asked for the close here, or you might have uncovered something here if you just asked this question. And she kind of got me to look really carefully at structuring what I was doing, so it was less like a presentation and more like a consultation where I ask them what they want to solve, and then we spend the time figuring out how to solve that versus me just walking in and doing something vanilla for people. Um, that
You
was a
heard it here
huge,
first,
huge,
folks. You
yeah.
heard it. You heard it here. The Scott Barnett secret sauce. Take your mom on sales demos.
I think it would help some of us. It helped me.
Oh, that is awesome. But here's three words that I used to use with my team. Optimization drives valuation. Well, here's my bias. I'm also pragmatic certified. And so this kind of is more from a product marketing, product management perspective. But if there is any credence to the concepts of pricing, packaging, positioning relative to total available market and that kind of thing, then it is tweaks in portfolio, right? The very relative options that you have that is part of what influences how you get to market and penetrate a market. Meaning, at some point, optimization isn't just how do I think about getting from X number of demos, generate X number of proposals. There's a bigger picture that is involved in how you optimize that kind of thing.
Well, you're bringing a whole new discipline into the conversation now. You've suddenly thrown product in there, and now this is like a three-way thing. But I love that you did that.
I really shouldn't do that.
No, I love that because honestly, that's the next natural step is product needs to be part of all of this. It's not just marketing and sales that needs to drive revenue. It's product. I mean, how do you drive marketing and sales if your product becomes out of date or stale and is missing key things that the market wants? You can throw all the money you want at the front end of it, but if you don't drive the improvements in the product, nothing is going to change. And a lot of companies have seen that.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, probably someone listening to this is thinking in terms of sales or marketing leadership, and that may or may not include their ability to affect pricing, packaging, positioning, product features, and that kind of thing. Though I will say this, one of the most powerful things you could do from the perspective of sales and marketing leadership, if product is a separate discipline, would be to help them prioritize their requirements management. Right?
Yeah.
As in, here's the new features we want to build. Here are the bugs and fixes that we need to do, or the tweaks. And in any given period of time, I can only deliver on so many of those requirements. One of my best friends was our product management leader, and you literally end up with a database of 1,000 or more, sometimes thousands of ideas. And hey, in this release next week, we're only going to get to 23 of them. Which 23 are going to be most effective with regard to making money? Sales and marketing can have a lot to do with helping them think through that. If you get into it.
You're right. And this is a place actually where a marketing person who lacks sales skills is going to suffer, right? Because they may have all the data, they may have talked to the customers, but they may not be able to sell their internal vision to the product people and get it prioritized. And so maybe internal sales for a marketing person is actually, because we're all selling all the time, is actually a skill that's worth building and that's something that you could learn from a salesperson.
Yeah.
Listening to sales leaders.
Well, and the other way around too, right? I mean, if we're telling salespeople they need to get into the heads and hearts of their potential customer, the same is true inside of the organization, right? Because what engineering doesn't want to hear is, if we only had X, we could close the deal and beat competitor Y, right? They hear that all the time, right? And their perspective instantly is, yeah, but we've got a bunch of other competing priorities. Thanks for weighing in. Right?
Yeah. You have to get good at managing the backlog, but that sometimes means that you don't get the attention that you might otherwise need. And so being able to persuade them is super key. And that internal sales process involves both having the data, which is more of a marketing discipline, and then having and knowing the market size, and then having the skills to convince people, which is more of a sales discipline.
I remember the first time I got my lunch handed to me, in this case by the owner of the company. He's like, I evaluate that request on two things. One, can I sell it to other people? Number one, because if not, that just means I'm a job shop software developer and I'm not a job shop software developer. I'm not developing a feature for one customer. I don't care what your deal is. Is this duplicatable and sellable to other people in our target? And the second thing was, will they pay for it?
Yeah.
Meaning, will they pay for us to develop that for them? And that stuck with me a long time.
That's a great business model though, because if you are in consulting, for example, your clients can pay you to develop software that you can then learn to sell to other people. They essentially pay your product costs, and then you can turn around and market that if you can be disciplined about what work you take on and not have to be so specialized that it only applies to one company in the world. Love that.
Well, and the thing that we're talking here to somebody in a more, in a mid or larger size company, it's probably who we reach with this particular set of conversations in a topic like this. That might be something that sales and marketing could be thinking about, and just getting inside of the shoes of what's going on elsewhere in your organization, and say, in terms of being able to position your request in a way that they will hear as opposed to not hear, because, they've heard it all. So, Scott, let's talk about ABX a little more. Is that,
sure.
Have we plumbed that from your perspective? Why do you think that's a good place to start when it comes to thinking about revenue generation as a team sport? Whether it's somebody's formal methodology or book, or do you just have that as a kind of an ethos? What's your approach?
I think the reason I want to emphasize this is because it's an area where some companies are struggling right now, and they're seeing, and some companies are seeing massive returns. And so if you need to do more with less, if your budgets are flat in the economic environment, one of the ways to do that is to stand up a new demand model, like an account-based growth strategy,
right.
Where you are targeting specific accounts jointly with sales and marketing. And you are going after those in a structured way, using things like automation to help direct accounts to different areas, right? And you can have different plays, for example, which marketing is really good at, because we've got marketing technology like Marketo or HubSpot that can run plays, and then and we can push the things to sales that sales needs, and help them automate some things. So, for example, one of the companies that I've worked with is Demandbase. Demandbase has this whole orchestration module, which, as things move through the buyer's journey and they start to look like they are pretty qualified, you can put that in a sales cadence in SalesLoft or Outreach, which is a sales communication system. Integrations exist to push things into Marketo if it looks like it might need to be nurtured, or if it's upstream of nurturing, we don't know who the contacts are and we need to drive awareness. Advertising can be run to them. It can be really, really intelligent and in terms of helping you using data to drive the next action. And I've talked to companies like Domo. Domo's doing some super cool stuff. I can't talk too much about it under the cone of silence, but they're a data-based company that's using account-based growth strategies to do things like tell their sales reps, hey, this account is one that you should pay attention to, and here's a list of things that we recommend you talk about based on what they were up to. Mm-hmm. They actually talk about account-based growth as being one of the more important things in their marketing arsenal. And so if it's something you haven't really capitalized on yet, if it's something you haven't really set up yet, if you don't know who's on your site, you don't know what they're doing, if you don't have that level of detail and depth in terms of target accounts, it's a good place to start playing together, because marketing and sales have to cooperate on that one, figuring out who the target accounts are and rolling out the plays and going after those accounts and trying to land them.
You just touched on a really powerful thing that I haven't thought about for a while, and it's relevant to both sales and marketing, which is not just the who, as in here's the account, here are the key players, and maybe what's their activity on our website or that kind of thing, but the kind of timing that happens when you understand where they're at as a company. I mean, I remember an old tactic in sales, the why you, why now email, right? Hey, Scott, I'm reaching out to you because I saw that you just had a press release. And if you know, if this implies that you guys are X, then you might be interested in, why you, why now? But yeah, sometimes the timing of just good news, bad news, or a product release or something means that there's another dimension or dynamic to when the time is right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that with the tools that we have now, like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you can have kind of a unique view into. Um, and so, for example, there are tools that look at the press releases. There are tools that look at organization changes. There are tools that look at things like promotions. Those are things that you can actually automate outreach based on. And there are companies that are doing that very successfully.
Interesting.
Um,
See,
yeah,
I didn't know that. And that totally makes sense because, hey, you and I both know when there's a merger or a staffing change, somebody takes over the EMEA division, there's, in a sense, some new brain is coming in going, okay, there's going to be new budgets, new head count, shifts in head count, shifts in strategy. What does that mean for you and therefore how you should sell and market? But Scott,
yeah.
are there any questions that I should have asked you that I haven't?
Um, I can't think of anything. I think we've had a good conversation. I think that maybe just the what's next question would be, in
Awesome.
this area. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, so I think that a lot of companies in the future are going to be looking at how do they benefit from things like AI, right? And how do we scale? So if you've got one salesperson, how do we scale that one salesperson so they can have an outsized impact? And the only way to do that is using things like technology and better processes. Because you're right, if you've only got a certain number of hours and your budgets are flat and you can't add three more salespeople, how are you going to drive more revenue? You're going to have to focus on things that are higher profit, changing the product mix, perhaps that people are selling, things that have a higher take rate, partnerships. There are a bunch of things that you can do, but technology and the better use of technology, I think, is going to be like a key part of that. And so I'm excited to see sort of what comes next. Um, Microsoft just invested in Chat GPT, which is
Right.
that AI
And
technology.
no small amount,
Yeah,
right?
what's that?
And no small amount, right?
Oh
And I
yeah,
mean, like 10 billion. That's putting a stake in the ground.
it is. And it's funny because a lot of people are worried that AI could be abused by kids who want to have AI write their term papers for them, right? And it could be better term paper than the kid could write. Um, Granted, it probably would crib a bunch of sources that would be illegal. Um, there are
Well,
some
you saw just
limitations with
just this
AI we got
last
to watch
week.
out for.
You saw
What's
this.
that?
You saw just this last week that ChatGPT, or I mean AI, successfully passed the Wharton MBA entrance exam. I mean, yeah, crazy. No, you're right though. And some of this stuff is just going to happen and we're just going to kind of follow along. But I think if there is a way that someone can get ahead of this, which I think is to your point, keeping an eye out for where and how this might touch down for us as sales and marketing leaders could be huge, right?
Yeah.
And I don't just mean, can you write, kick out more social media posts? I mean, the ability to smartly evaluate accounts or other activities in a way that teaches you along the way instead of you having to teach the software everything that you want from it.
Yeah, I think that's a super valid point. I mean, and we're getting a lot of benefits from AI and predictive modeling today. Like Salesforce has built Einstein into their product so that it can help build you a predictive lead scoring model to help sales prioritize its time on the stuff that's most likely to convert based on the data science, right? That's something that can be set up and run on autopilot in the background and come up with a model that's way more sophisticated than anything that marketing was able to put together 10 years ago by guessing at what the point value of a webinar attendance meant.
Right. Exactly.
Um, but it's funny that we have all these tools, all this data, and yet in some cases I still feel like we're just in the baby steps of some of this stuff, and we're just starting to get learning how to make it work all together, and bringing people into becoming digital natives that care about data and care about technology. I think that's going to be a thing that's maybe challenging with sales and marketing people in some cases. Is we like our art, or we like getting out there and pressing the flesh and closing, and we believe that those are the ways to move things forward. And what we may find is that technology can extend us and take us in new directions that we never thought of before. So I'm real excited. I think the future of this stuff is to be written, but there are some interesting things sort of showing up right now in terms of the direction.
Anything else besides AI to keep an eye on?
I think AI combined with automation and analytics are going to be sort of the triple threat. And I think the companies that can make good use of it are going to have a competitive advantage over the ones that can't or don't. And so if as I'm looking at sort of the landscape of the future, as a software developer, writing something once and then having it scale infinitely. You write a piece of software once and then you can sell an unlimited number of those. That used to be the way of the future. But what if using AI, I'm able to write almost an infinite number of variations of my software that just taking standard coding that the AI sort of fills in, and then I can better tailor my stuff to the market in a way that my competitors couldn't do before. The ones who are early adopters on this are going to have a huge competitive advantage, and it's not just in marketing and sales; it's in product development. It's everywhere, but it's going to be around analytics, it's going to be around automation, and it's going to be around AI. I think that's where things are going to be headed. And for somebody who likes talking to people and enjoys making a sales call and making that sale and gets the thrill of it, it's a little scary to think that at some point an AI may be able to take some calls off of my plate, or some section of the funnel out of my hands, because people can't distinguish it from me, or it's better than me, because the emails that are going out in my name were the emails that were the most successful from the 10% most successful salespeople in the company, right? And they were the ones that were evaluated as being, what should go out. Maybe I was in the bottom, 5% of my salespeople. Now, the stuff that was crafted by the top 10% starts going out in my name, and suddenly my numbers start to surge. And that's what automation can do. I think it's just a super interesting time right now, honestly. But also maybe a little scary, because you wonder, what's going to happen with my job?
Well,
and I think the key. Go ahead.
in a way, that's not new, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we could probably point to plenty of historical examples, but we'll save that for another time, another cup of coffee conversation. And Scott, I really appreciate you spending just a few moments to kind of share your insights. If someone here wants to connect with you, LinkedIn the best place? Is that the best place to connect or get in touch?
Yeah, if you just go to linkedin.com/in/Scott Barnett, I am the one. That's probably the best way to reach me.
Beautiful. Well, Scott, thank you for spending a little time. And if you're still listening to this, and I trust that you are, I really appreciate you spending a little time just having a cup of coffee and giving us an ear on V2's Thought Leader Conversations series. We will see you next time. And